Out-of-touch Tories have been a recurring theme during the cost of living crisis, and we can welcome a new addition to the genre this week. Ex-Tory MP Edwina Currie appeared on Good Morning Britain to offer this advice.
Here's one of my suggestions for a tip, something that's dirt cheap. Martin knows about this sort of thing. If you put some of this behind your radiators, it really works. It makes the whole room nice and warm, and it means that you can turn down your thermostat without it causing you any more discomfort. I mean, you know, Martin and Susanna, most people my age have lived in houses without central heating, but we are dependent on it now. And just that kind of little thing makes such a difference. Moving the sofa away from the radiator. You don't want to be heating the sofa, you want to be heating the room. If you've got
Edwina, forgive me,
there's
nothing wrong with
that kind of thing, you know.
There's nothing wrong with the tips, and the tips are right, and there's lots of great detailed tips out there. But ultimately, let's be plain. We have an 80% rise in the price cap in October. We have another predicted 52% rise in the price cap in January. We're 7 months through the 10-month assessment period of that, so that's likely to be in the right ballpark. That will bring a typical bill in the UK to £5,400 a year. Many pensioners, you're talking pensioners, tend to have bigger than typical bills because they need more heating on. £5,400 is substantially over half the full state pension, well bigger than that over the old state pension that is less, and more for people on universal credits and benefits who get less amount than that. Those tips you're suggesting, and I've been giving them for years, if they would work, I would be out there talking all the time only about that. They are not enough. Even Liz Truss seems to have come around to the idea that that's not enough. And I think that was what people took issue with. The idea that saying that some small tips, you know, incremental 10, 20% savings, 10 or 20% savings do not cover a 50% rise in April, 80% rise in October, and 50% rise again in January. I think that's the frustration.
Yeah, but Martin, yeah, of course, and we're all very frustrated about it, and government is going to be doing a lot more. They've done a certain amount, nowhere near enough. I totally accept that. But if none of us do anything else, if we expect everything to continue, to have the house at the same temperature, not to have to put on a sweater, then we are actually not helping ourselves. And part of all of this, like through COVID, is actually helping ourselves as well as expecting government and local authorities. In Germany, for example, in Germany, they have already announced that local authorities have got to switch off street lights. They've already announced that shops have got to cut down on their lighting for their shop fronts and things like that. We've got none of that. But we can take those sort of decisions. That's what really will make a difference.
It goes without saying that Edwina Currie's contribution there is pretty jaw-dropping, and Martin Lewis was absolutely right to call her out. Frankly, it's insulting to suggest people can make slight tweaks to how their radiators work in the face of energy bills topping almost £4,000 a year. Full transparency. She did say later in that segment that she doesn't think government can do nothing. Indeed, she thinks they can do a lot, seems terrified at the idea that government intervention should be the primary focus right now. Indeed, this segment on GMB came about because Edwina Currie objected to Martin Lewis's description of the current state of affairs as a catastrophe. That came up again on air.
Edwina, isn't that a catastrophe?
Those who can reduce their use, Edwina, it helps everybody else.
Isn't it a catastrophe? Let's be honest.
It doesn't help using words like that.
But it is Martin, a catastrophe. You may not want the language.
It may help your mental health to do something like that.
No, okay. I know. I absolutely.
The language is not helpful.
I'm afraid you can't ignore the rise.
It does not help.
You can't ignore the rise in bills. That's what the catastrophe is. It's not my language. It's the practice of what's happening.
I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but I mean, how does this work? I'm freezing, but don't worry, my mental health is great because nobody's saying this is a catastrophe. I've got frostbite in my fingers and hands, but I feel really happy because people on TV, they say it's okay. So you know what? I'm feeling really good today upstairs, 8 out of 10. What planet are these people on? Another dose of wealthy right-wingers not getting it came in the mail on Sunday. They offered this advice to their readers. Save cash on household bills by taking a cruise. It is now almost cheaper to go on an all-inclusive holiday than it is to stay at home. How is this supposed to save cash for anyone? All it means is that it's as expensive to live at home as it is to go on a holiday abroad. Ash, this has confounded me. It's one of those where Are they being tongue-in-cheek or are they being serious? Have conservatives in the media, in broadcast and in print, completely lost the plot?
I'm not sure if they ever had the plot. I mean, having the plot and a firm grasp on reality would require acknowledging several very inconvenient truths. The first thing is that we have an inflationary crisis, not because there is a wage price spiral, but because there is a profit price spiral. The second thing would be looking at the fact that in real terms, pay fell and or flatlined over the last decade. So there is not much give in people's household budgets. And then the third thing would be looking at the fact that people who are below the poverty line, people who are really destitute already and have been because of the cumulative effect of over a decade's worth of austerity, have nowhere to go in terms of either finding new means of support or indeed cutting down on their energy use even further. Because what we know is that, of course, people on lower incomes tend to use a lot less energy than people on higher incomes. So any conversation which is remotely serious would have to acknowledge those three things. And if you can't do that because you've got a political interest not to, you are left absolutely flailing and coming into contact only with the ridiculous and presenting it to the public, the way that someone would plate up a dog's turd and say that this is a wedding feast. It's absolutely insulting. I'd go as far as to say it's grotesque. But I do think that part of the blame lies with, I've got to say, the producers of Good Morning Britain here, because Edwina Currie tweeted her offence at the crisis being called a catastrophe. She's going to do that because she's not politically relevant unless she says more and more outlandish and offensive and caricaturish things. And I think if what you want to do is present a serious discussion to the public, where of course you can still fulfill your impartiality briefs and have somebody who's more conservative and have someone who's more left wing. But I don't think that getting Edwina Currie on is a necessity for fulfilling the legally mandated balance that broadcasters have to have in this country.
What I find interesting is you've got a mirroring, really, of frankly deranged story in the Mail on Sunday. Save money on heating bills by going on a cruise. And that is being reflected in broadcast media. That wasn't happening to the same extent 15 years ago. And it does feel like the Jeremy Kyle mind virus has taken over the whole of broadcast media. In so much as 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, daytime TV, people shouting at each other, making no sense, prodding at one another in this very attention-seeking way, which Edwina Currie personifies, that has now become the norm for politics and political coverage in this country. Am I just getting old, Ash? And I think, in my day, it wasn't like this. Or is there something to that? Has the genre of political TV changed in a way that is designed to stimulate and provoke a response, which is actually pretty toxic if you want to solve problems?
Political media obviously has changed. And the big change has been that political media that's on broadcast is in a conversation with social media all the time. Because if you have, a pretty healthy audience comparatively for a show like GMB, but overall your audience is getting older and will be dying out because that is the nature of television audiences. In order, if you want to keep reaching people, it's got to be something which will do well on social media. Now, for it to do well on social media, it will probably, I think, prioritize and indeed reward low information content. It's stuff which stimulates emotional responses and doesn't necessarily help people learn anything new. And because of that conversation, I think producers' incentives for how current affairs conversations are curated and, how they pan out when they're being televised. But I also think if you go back to, David Cameron coming to power, a really big theme of television was finding people who were benefits recipients and making them figures of such disgust and disdain and contempt that it could provide a kind of cultural foundation for the attacks on the welfare state that he and his Chancellor George Osborne then carried out. Now, I would say the way of doing that was also low information. It just wasn't necessarily as invested in the pursuit of virality, which I think shapes and dictates current affairs programming now.